Yeah, so firstly, the idea that if you're a Democratic president and you get to nominate and have a Democratic Supreme Court justice, that's an interesting concept in theory. But I seem to remember that Obama had spent almost a year with a vacancy on the Supreme Court that McConnell explicitly said he was going to deny a hearing for, which was insane. The Democrats were robbed of a Supreme Court seating there, and who's to say if Republicans would ever seat a Supreme Court justice? Maybe next time it'll be 2 years before an election, and they're saying, well, maybe we should wait for the next election cycle. You have to keep in mind that when the court was created, the reason why there are lifetime appointments is because justices, Supreme Court justices, are supposed to be insulated from the political pressures relating to running again for office and all of the other things that go into having to keep in mind like an election season. However, all of that, as Cenk rightly pointed out, is completely destroyed if you are taking bribes or getting paid or getting some kind of compensation based perhaps on the way that you might rule in the court. So an ethics guideline, I don't know how anybody could be opposed to that. And the nice thing about term limits are people focus on term limits as like term limiting a person, which is fine, whatever. The nice thing about term limits isn't necessarily the term limit. It's that you could apportion so that every single president gets either 1 or 1.5 picks, depending upon what you actually put that term limit as, which I think everybody would agree would probably be fair. If every president was guaranteed the same number of Supreme Court picks, it means that the composition of the Supreme Court would roughly align with how Americans are voting for president, rather than this idea that, hey, maybe you'll get really lucky and one president, if Trump were to win again, if Sotomayor were to, God forbid, die or step down, maybe Trump, one president, gets 4 Supreme Court picks, which is insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Josie, the reality is, well, hang on, Josie, the reality is, isn't it, that had it been the other way around, had Joe Biden been able to pack the Supreme Court with 3 very progressive judges, I think Republicans would have gone completely nuts. And there's the problem, is that it doesn't really matter which side is doing it. If you have the ability in one 4-year term to have that kind of significant sea change in the makeup of the Supreme Court, doesn't it lose its ability to be impartial?
Well, we had a liberal leading Supreme Court for 60 years. And now it's the first time where it's switched and it's starting to lean conservative again for the first time in a long time. Now, if you want to add term limits to the Supreme Court, that would require a constitutional amendment of Article 3. And that would mean two-thirds of Congress and 3/4 of the states would have to agree to term limits on the Supreme Court. So that's just not something you can wave a wand and do.